Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Barbie Brewer, who is the author of Live and Let Lead and the Chief People Officer at Safe Security. Barbie, would you tell us a little bit about what Safe Security does for folks who may not know much about it?
Sure. Safe Security is a cyber risk quantification and management company, and it's a bit of a new space. So
Hmm.
not only do we have a new product, but we're also charting the waters of a whole new kind of space of technology. And it's becoming more and more important as we see more and more cyber risk
Mhm.
arise, and we're seeing the importance of having cyber insurance and things like that.
Mhm.
For example, we just got a partnership with Mosaic, and Mosaic's a cyber insurance company, and we help them evaluate the risk of their
Mhm.
customers, and we help their customers be safer as well if they partake in our product. So basically, we
Mhm.
have API hooks. We see what's going on in your ecosystem of technology. We can notify you of where your risks are, and we quantify that for you, not just as a likelihood of breach, but also a financial risk, PR risk, things like that, and lots of data coming in to help you
Mhm.
have the data you need as a CISO or a CIO to talk to your board and talk to your employees about where the right investments are to increase the cybersecurity at your
Mhm.
company.
Excellent. And I know you wanted to chat a little bit about remote work and talking about remote work and cybersecurity. There was just a paper that is going to be, so I've got a preview copy of it, but it's going to be coming out pretty soon, showing that actually remote workers surprisingly have more cybersecurity awareness than in-office workers. So it's
Interesting.
harder, yep, it's harder to phish them, it's harder to get them to get their
Huh.
cybersecurity breached because they feel more aware that they're not inside the office, inside kind of a safe space. So they're feeling a little bit more in a space that, okay, I have to actually watch out and
Yeah, a little
think
more
about
protective.
a little
Yeah.
bit more protective of their cybersecurity. So I found that to be quite relevant finding in because you are an advocate of remote work.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I hadn't heard that, but I'm happy to hear it.
Excellent. I'll have to send you the paper.
Please do. I would
Good,
love to read it.
good. So tell me a little bit more about why you are an advocate of remote work.
Well, it's interesting. When I was at Netflix, I was there for a little over 6 years, I think,
Mhm.
and I loved it. I loved the culture. I loved the product. I loved the people. It was wonderful. But then I got diagnosed with a rare tumor, and I had to go on chemo for about a year. And the commute from where I live to where Netflix is was about an hour to 2 hours each way, depending on
Mhm.
traffic and weather. And I also spent a lot of time in an airplane visiting other countries, which I loved. I love to travel, but became hard when I was on chemo. At the same time, this is getting kind of personal. At the same time, I was going through a divorce and becoming a single mom every
Mhm.
other week. And so something had to give, and I had to decide if that was my health, my family, or my work. And it was sad I had to make a choice between those things, but I did. And I was lucky that GitLab at the time was hiring for their first chief people officer.
Mhm.
And Sid called me up and started recruiting me into his company. And it was a great opportunity for me to practice my craft, still feel like I was building my career, but to be
Mhm.
able to do so in an all remote environment. GitLab, when I
Mhm.
joined, was probably about 150 people in about 40 different countries, and there was no office building anywhere.
Mhm.
They built themselves completely remote, and it opened my eyes. So it was a great opportunity not to
Mhm.
just practice my craft, but learn and continue to learn and grow myself about a new way of doing work. And I became passionate about it. I saw so many benefits, not just for
Mhm.
myself, but for other employees and for the world. Really, I'm a little bit of a um, on my soapbox about this because I
Mhm.
think it's so great for the whole world, and not just company profits, but the evolution of our society.
That's interesting. So, talking about, thank you for sharing about your personal experience. Talking about disability, there was a recent study showing that people with disabilities, well, there was a drop in employment at the start of the pandemic for both people with disabilities and without disabilities. So by Q2 2022, which is when the study ended, the people without disabilities, they recovered to not quite the level they had before the pandemic. It was about 1.1% below the employment rate. But for people with disabilities by Q2 2022, it went actually to 3.5% above
That's
their
great.
pre-pandemic level of employment. And that was just what the authors clearly found, was that was due to remote work, that it
Yeah.
enabled people with disabilities, and of course you were disabled with the chemotherapy situation,
Yep.
that enabled people to actually do work and stay in the workforce, whereas they would have dropped out otherwise.
Yeah, it really is great for diversity of both mental function and well as physical function and the diversity we see in those areas. It's great for working parents, and I won't just say working moms. I think
Sure.
that, working parents in general are benefiting from it. Yeah, and I love the stats that you have. It's enlightening for me. I love how much I can learn from you during this discussion as well.
I'll be happy to provide that information for you as well. So when I helped about, yeah, it's 24 companies by now transition, figuring out their hybrid work and remote work policies. And I think 22 of them chose a hybrid first model, with most of them permitting some people to be fully remote. But because there are some benefits from the office that we do see from the research. So when you ask the question of what is the office for, people can collaborate more effectively in the office for synchronous, more intense forms of communication, where they can actually observe each other's body language, they can form relationship, they can build trust. Socializing and team bonding is better in the office. Then mentoring and on-the-job training is better in the office because you can have more vulnerability, you can show people things. And then the office is better for more intense forms of communication in terms of conversation. So nuanced conversations, performance conversations, conveying strategy by a leader, again, that benefits from body language. So what we end up seeing is that if you ask the question, what is the office for? Those are high stakes activities, but they generally don't take more than 10, 15, 20% of an employee's time. So most companies that I work with end up with most of their employees coming in maybe 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week. And I'm curious how, but there are two companies with which I work which chose to go to be home-based, remote, because they had less collaboration with each other and less need for that. Or they
Mhm.
had a lot of employees. There was one company that really valued talent. So for them, it was really important to be able to hire anywhere and for that talent to feel fully and equally on the same footing with everyone else. So that chose to go fully remote. So I'm curious, how do you address those kind of problems of areas where the office does seem to be in some ways better?
So I don't think that any remote company should never get their employees together. I think
Mhm.
that there always should be some kind of interaction that happens at some frequency. Some people, it might be 1 day a week if that's best for their business. Some people it might be 1 week a month. Some people
Mhm.
might be a week every 6 months of
Mhm.
getting folks together. I think the in-office stuff is great for building trust and relationship-based trust more than task-based trust. I
Mhm.
do think, though, that one of the reasons that some of these studies are saying that collaboration, feedback, a lot of those things are because we're not doing it right.
Mhm.
Right. So I think that in a lot of ways, when you say we can't show each other our work, if we're trying to show things to each other, the reality is that you really can't. There's enough
Mhm.
technology. I went remote before COVID, right? So I
Yeah.
started this thing before the pandemic, and there wasn't as much technology out there
Mhm.
back in those old days. But the one thing that the pandemic gave us was a real rise in innovation
Mhm.
in collaboration companies for remote collaboration. And I do think that we can't use being in the office as an excuse not to collaborate, not to give feedback, not to
Mhm.
have those hard conversations. So I think that the time in the office should really be built around the trust and
Mhm.
getting to know each other and making it so that when you go back to your homes, you can still feel comfortable having those hard conversations. I
Mhm.
feel like right now I'm still reading your body language, even though we're on camera.
Sure.
When I was at GitLab, I'll be honest with you, I was at Netflix for 6 years. I was at Cisco for 7 years. Um, some of my colleagues from GitLab that I only saw once every 9 months in person, which even that I don't like the term of because you're a person, I'm a person, we're together, we're in. Um, but
In
uh, I keep,
office.
yeah, I keep more in touch with them than I do
Mhm.
the colleagues I sat next to every day. And that's
Mhm.
because the nature of our relationship hasn't really changed as much. We got together on Zoom when we worked together. We can get together on Zoom now. I work shortly
Okay.
with a company called Love to Know Media. I actually have a meeting today with one of my colleagues from that company, and we're just going to both get a glass of wine and we're going to chat. And
Mhm.
she recently lost her job, so she wants career
Mhm.
advice. And I said, great,
Okay.
let's meet with a glass of wine, right? We don't need to make everything so transactional. I think part of the problem we have with remote work is we're making everything transactional when we get
Mhm.
on the Zoom meetings. Whereas if you went into a conference room and you
Mhm.
showed up before the leader showed up, everyone in the conference room would talk to each other until
Sure.
the leader became present. On Zoom, it's like we leave cameras off and stay quiet until the meeting officially commences. Instead
Mhm.
of asking people about their weekends or taking the opportunity to share some pictures of their kids or their dogs or their
Mhm.
houseplants, we can do better at purposely
Mhm.
making the environment more collaborative, more friendly,
Mhm.
even from a remote perspective. What I don't like is the idea that you're going to say once a week or once a month or once every 6 months, and there's going to be important decisions, important discussions that don't take place because you're waiting for that day of the week to happen.
Mhm.
And so I
Sure.
think we really I'm not opposed to hybrid work. I think it's the hardest. I think it's harder than remote, but I'm not
Mhm.
opposed to it at all. In fact, we do that at Safe Security. We as a leadership team try to get together a week a month.
Mhm.
Our employees in certain regions get together 3 days a week. I'm not anti it, whatever, by any means, but I think that we can't use it as an excuse. We can't use the remote
Mhm.
part as an excuse not to collaborate, not to give feedback, not to interact. That shouldn't
Sure.
be considered your heads down. I just do my desk work then and I wait to have my
Mhm.
conversations when I'm in the office. So I think
Mhm.
that's what's dangerous about a hybrid is it gives people that excuse to wait. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of the in-office collaboration that was happening wasn't
Mhm.
healthy. The hallway conversations, the hallway decisions, the I'm going to talk to the person closest to me, but I'm not going to bring the person in the loop that's on the floor above me,
Mhm.
wasn't good for the organizations. It might have been fun. It might have felt good to have the water cooler conversations, but you might not have been bringing the right people into the conversation. And even when everyone was in the same office together, there was still location bias.
Mhm.
There's also research says that if someone's more than 100 feet away from you, you send an email or a Slack message instead of standing up and going and talking to them,
Sure.
right? There's research that says that these open office spaces actually lead to less communication because people put their
Yeah.
headphones on and try to block out the noise. So we have to push ourselves of looking at the remote aspect of it a little bit differently
Mhm.
and holding ourselves accountable for doing better and
Mhm.
being deliberative about trying to do better. So I don't know if that answers your question or not,
Yeah.
but I'm not 100% willing to accept the research as a given. And because
Mhm.
I think we can do better.
I think that's a very fair point because, of course, people are using traditional methodologies and shoehorning office-based methodologies into hybrid work and remote work. I mean, when I work with a client, I always teach them techniques that are better adapted for remote work. So, for example, virtual co-working, where everyone opens up a Microsoft Teams or a video conference, other video conference like a Zoom call
Yeah.
for a team, let's say 6 to 8 people, and they go on there for an hour or two, and they just work on their individual tasks, but then they're able to ask questions or chit chat with each other, and it gives some of the feeling of being in a co-working environment where you're working in an open office and you're able to answer people's questions, especially helpful for junior team members to get
Yeah.
them integrated into the team. And
Yeah.
so this is very helpful for distributed teams, not simply remote teams, but you have a
Exactly.
large
Yeah.
company, they're distributed. So
Yeah.
when people are working remotely or when they're distributed, it's quite useful. So that's a technique that I found my clients to be really adopting quite widely because it's a
Yeah.
very effective technique. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, but
No, I've always done open office hours where I'll
Mhm.
just open my Zoom up. I'll put it, I'll announce to Slack that I've got open office hours right
Mhm.
now. Anyone wants to pop in? Often no one does. And I'm sitting there just doing my work with my Zoom
Mhm.
window open, but it provides that opportunity. And I think to what you said about sharing and instructing, I think it's a lot easier actually to screen share on Meet or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, right? It's not about the technology and be able to code right in front of someone and
Mm.
have them
Mhm.
sharing the screen with you. They can take over your screen. That's easier than you trying to look over a little laptop screen with me while I do it,
Mhm.
right? So there's
Sure.
there's there's ways that we have to, not remove the excuses for not having it work
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
And so, what do you think is going to be the future of remote work in the context that a number of companies, including large ones, including in the tech space, are asking employees to spend more time in the office?
So I think that it's going to play out and it's going to play out differently, but at the end of the day, employees are going to have a choice. And just as you can use a company culture to choose if that's the right company for you to join,
Mhm.
talent will also make the choice of, is this a company I want to join? Does it let me have the life I want to have? And working remotely or in the office is only one aspect of whether or not you have the life you want working for a company, but it will be one of them. And especially as the job market gets stronger, right now, with all the layoffs in tech and everything that's happening in tech, employees might feel like it's not in their hands as much.
Mm.
The economy will turn around again. And some of
Sure.
these companies that are forcing people to be in the office are going to have a harder time getting talent. Now,
Yeah.
there is some talent who wants to be in the office and they're going to make the choice to be at an in-office company.
Mhm.
So my hope is that it just gives people more choice and that companies do what's best for them, but that the workforce still has choice in how they want to work and where they want to work.
Mhm.
I really believe that there's so much good in getting people out of the daily commute and out of that daily grind in terms of productivity, in terms of environment, that's we can all agree on. But when it actually comes to society, like Elon Musk
Mhm.
loves to say how it's unethical to let people work remotely, right? And I don't dislike the man, but I sometimes want to just give him a little nudge when he says that. I get it for Tesla. I get it for SpaceX. He's got hardware. I don't want my car built in someone's garage. I'm glad that they're showing up for work. It doesn't make sense to me for Twitter. And so, because whilst not everybody can work remotely and why it's not conducive to every job there is out there, if you get people off the road, it makes the drive easier for the school teachers. It makes the drive easier for the nurses and the doctors and the police officers and the firefighters. They're no longer stuck in traffic for 2 hours. They get to work in 30 minutes because we got the software workers off the road, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't, even though you could have envy of like, oh man, she gets to work at home, you can also think, well, that's one less car on the road that I have to worry about, right? So it is good for society from that perspective, in addition to the environmental issues of
Sure.
so many cars on the road. But it's also great for society in terms of it opening up a global economy for talent and
Mhm.
for services. So when I was working in Los Gatos for Netflix, but I was living in Pleasanton and I was having that
Mhm.
long commute, if I wanted to go to the doctor, if I wanted to go out to dinner, if I wanted to go out to lunch, if I wanted to have my hair done, I did that all by Netflix in Los Gatos. I didn't
Mhm.
have time to get home when my hairdresser
Sure.
would still be open or my doctor would still be. So when we put people back into their communities to work, all those services and supports in that community get more business. Now I
Mhm.
have lunch downtown Pleasanton instead of downtown Los Gatos. Now I get my pedicure with my girlfriends at lunchtime on a Tuesday instead of having to say, "Hey, are you free on a Saturday?" But we're all competing with each other's kids' soccer games. So, it's you can make space for different things in your life, but still get more work done. And
Excellent.
we're we're also not plucking people out of their communities. The
Mhm.
reality is right now, at least in America, and I believe this is worldwide, we pluck the best and the brightest out of their local communities
Mhm.
and we have them move to New York or San Francisco or Austin or Boston or Seattle or wherever that city might be that has all the jobs. Now again, this is very tech company specific in what I'm saying here. But if you left those folks in their communities, they become role models. Their
Mhm.
income contributes to the tax revenue in those cities. There's a lot of fortuitous gain from there of when the
Sure.
kids in that community don't just see careers that are on TV, but the take your
Mhm.
parent to school day has engineers and accountants and HR people and marketing people and all these different roles
Mhm.
that they can do that they never thought of. They just thought teacher, doctor, nurse, firefighter, football player, basketball player, right? But they didn't think that there was a marketplace for some of these jobs at respected companies. Now there is. My best recruiter at GitLab was in Nigeria. I wonder if he would have ever had a job if there wasn't a GitLab out there, or a job with a company that could pay well. And so it provided that opportunity. I had a great recruiter in Russia. I had a wonderful one in the Ukraine. In Ukraine, it was wonderful to be able to bring opportunity to the talent instead of taking the talent to the opportunity. So I feel like we gotta try to figure it out, and we've got to push ourselves to not survive this idea of remote work, but to consider it a strategic advantage and figure out how to thrive. And we have to remember that during COVID, everybody got the worst possible experience of remote work.
Sure.
They couldn't go to their local restaurant. They couldn't meet their friends for lunch, or a pedicure, or an activity, right? So whilst the trust building at work and the building friendships at work is nice and it's important, so is having your own community. You don't want to change friends every time you change jobs, right? So you want your friends to kind of last with you through different careers. And tenure isn't as long at companies anymore. So people aren't looking at their employer as this lifetime thing. So, that's just changed regardless of remote work. So really now you have the opportunity to work from your home and coach your kids' soccer team and meet your friends for lunch and actually build your community up and interact with your community more, which, by the way, can give you just as much loyalty to your company because they enabled you to have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, good point. And it reminds me of a number of communities which are actually establishing specifically attraction programs, like Tulsa has a remote program establishment. So I think another benefit
Vermont is.
Yep. So that actually regions can compete for talent. And that competition, of course, improves the region, improves everything around them.
Portugal is really, I think, leading the way in this. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a nice note in which to wrap up. Are there any last words with which you wish to leave our audience, Barbie?
No, I just thank you for helping companies through this. And again, it's not a one size fits all for everyone, but doing it well is good for everyone.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise. And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you check this out and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.